Welcome back to the class of Derrida and deconstruction. So, in the previous part, we discussed about deconstruction and the characteristics of deconstruction. So, according to Derrida, deconstruction is a way of criticizing not only both literary and philosophical texts but also political institutions. It is an approach to understanding the relationship between text and meaning. And he considers it as uh, the difference between two undecidable language and concepts like truth and justice. And in this manner, he tries to be critical about Platonism and gives emphasis on the appearances and beliefs that essence is to be found in appearance, because Plato and Aristotle emphasized on the appearance and essence, and Derrida is telling that for the essence we cannot do away with appearance. The essence can be found within the appearance, so he is not going to destroy. Deconstruction is not destruction, and he is considering it as a re-evaluation of all Western values. Number one, he is using this deconstruction as a re-evaluation of all Western values, right from the beginning of Aristotle and Plato. What are the values associated with literary text or literature that has to be re-evaluated through deconstruction? And secondly, he is suggesting that as the literary text always outlive the authors and become an embodiment of the cultural habit of that contemporary period. So, deconstruction wants to discover within it the discrepancies that has entered either through the progress of time or difference of culture, or maybe at the time of creating that text some differences which are buried within the text, which are not recorded, which are buried within the text. And thirdly, he is telling that re-evaluation of classic Western dialectic like poetry versus philosophy or reason versus revelation, structure versus creativity, etc., is being explored through this deconstruction. So, he is telling that deconstruction is basically political because it is associated with politics. As you know, the politician always says if he said something and that is printed in the newspaper or that goes to the media, the next day he gives a clarification. Actually, I didn't mean that. The press had misinterpreted me. So, what is that? That is the deconstruction. So, Derrida considers deconstruction as a political, concept which is politics, and he considers it as an explanation with an experience of the impossible. it is an explanation. It is an explanation within the existing structure, but experience of the impossible. Why impossible? Because to the normal surface, it is not visible. It is somewhere lying hidden, which the deconstructionist will have to search and find out. So, in this way, to him, deconstruction is the production of the structure's own dislocation and a new proclamation. It is a dislocation within the text. And he is telling that under it, language is beginning to let itself be transferred to, or at least summarized under, the name of writing. So, language is being transferred with its suggestiveness of meaning, and no longer it produces indicating a particular derivative. Rather, there are plurality of derivatives that deconstruction is trying to trace. It dislocates and it traces. And in all the senses of the word, writing thus comprehends language. Is telling that writing always comprehends language. So, deconstruction is working on logocentrism. And the Saussurean model of the signifier and the signified, he is telling that deconstruction also works with signifier and signified. Here, the signifier, the signified becomes the signifier. The signifier of the signifier. The signified becomes the signifier of the signifier. And it is a contrary movement of the language. So, signifier of the signifier conceals and erases itself in its own production. Suppose you take the example, there are so many examples. First, let us look at the deconstruction idea, like the word home. So, home can be deconstructed with shelter, with living place, this, that. There can be so many displacements. But suppose we will take a structure, a sentence, that the old woman lives in a palace. So here what happens? If we take the word palace, the word palace is having both signifier and the signified. And according to Derrida, the signified. So signified, what is signified? We imagine a bigger building with many rooms, very exhaustive arrangement within and all that. Signified is a huge structure of building. But Derrida is telling that signified will be the signifier. So when we take that huge building as the signifier, so what does it mean? Previously, we wrote that the old man is living in a palace. So it means the old man may be an ordinary servant, or maybe a destitute of some royal family who is living there. But when we take the signified, the structure before our eyes as the signifier, So it may suggest that that old man is not a destitute, not an old servant. She is the owner of this palace, the queen. So in this way, what happens? That deconstruction works by erasing or concealing its earlier suggestiveness and producing its own. And he is telling there is not a single signified that escapes, even if recaptured the play of signifying references that constitute language. The advent of writing is the advent of this play. He is telling this play or these nuances of language, it is there in the language. When the language was created, when there is the advent of language, there was the play within. And deconstruction is only pointing it out. Let's see, the playfulness within the language structure, it was there from the beginning. It was replacing, it was concealing, it was erasing the relationship between one and the other, between the words or between the sentences or between the paragraphs or between the images, phonetic images, etc. etc. So, he is telling, strictly speaking, it amounts to destroying the concept of sign and its entire logic. So, deconstruction is destroying the concept of sign. What was the concept of sign given by de Saussure? That it constitutes of signifier and signified, but deconstruction is destroying it and its entire logic. Why? Because here the signified is also the signifier of the signifier. It can be. And again there will be signified. And again that signified will be the signifier of the signifier of the signifier. So the process goes on. And there is no limit. It is an open-ended concept. So he is telling the written signifier is always technical and representative. It has no constitutive meaning. This derivation is a very origin of the notion of signifier. So, when we have the written signifier or the written language, there the signifier is always technical and it has no meaning of its own. When we say the word tree, TREE doesn't mean a huge structure, natural structure, a living plant. It has no meaning, but we ascribe meaning to it by our cultural experiences or our identities with the group or the meaning that we accept together. So, he is telling that logocentrism, which is also a phonocentrism, absolute proximity of voice and being of voice, meaning of being of voice and the ideality of meaning. So, in this way, every language is having no fixed meaning. Deconstruction doesn't accept the fixity of language or the fixity of suggestiveness or fixity of meaning in a language structure. And he is also telling that because it doesn't accept the fixity of meaning in the language structure, so it doesn't also believe that there ever has existed or functioned any meaning outside the structure. Outside the structure also, deconstruction is not going to search for any meaning or any suggestiveness. It wants to operate. Deconstruction operates within the structure. And They are preceded by a truth or a meaning already constituted by and within the element of the logos. So, Derrida believes that every language structure is preceded by a truth. We have a truth, we have a thought in our mind, therefore we create a sentence or a structure of language. And already the meaning is constructed within. When you are having an idea, you are writing a story. We are writing the story of greedy dog. You have in your mind that ultimately you will show the morality at the end, that we should not be greedy. Therefore, it is within the logos. The language itself, the language structure is itself having meaning and truth constituted within it. But then what is the function of deconstruction? Sorry. Yes. What is the function of deconstruction? Deconstruction is going to find out the discrepant inverse or parallel within the structure. Why? Because sign must be unity of a heterogeneity. Sign is not having one single unity, it is a unity of heterogeneity. Within that, so many meanings can be there. And since the signified is not in itself a signifier, a trace in any case is not a constituted in the sense by its trace relationship with a possible trace. So, first of all, if we approach it from signifier and signified, so signified is not itself a signifier, but there is a trace. And he is quoting from Aristotle's definition: spoken words are the symbols of mental experience, and written words are the symbols of spoken words. But Saussure says language and writing are two distinct systems of sign. The second exists for the sole purpose of representing the first. So the written language represents the spoken language. But Derrida is telling that oral language, either representing words in a synthetic and global manner or representing phonetically the elements of sounds constituting words, this limitation is at bottom justified in Saussure's eye. So he is telling that oral language may be representing any word or synthesizing any other meaning with it, or representing phonetically element of sound, but it has a limitation which is justified by Saussure. Therefore, he is telling that the concept of pictographic or natural writing would therefore be contradictory for Saussure. So Saussure is having a contradiction with himself. If the oral language represents words, then what about the pictographic language or natural writing? They will be having contradiction with them. One must therefore challenge in the very name of the arbitrariness of the sign, Saussurean definition of writing as image. Therefore, he is telling, I want to challenge this concept of Saussure, that Saussure cannot justify that the pictographic language and the natural writing, they will be one or they will be different. To him, they are different, but it is contradictory. The pictographic language can be natural writing, or natural writing can be sometimes pictographic. Therefore, Derrida is talking about difference. He is telling It is, on the contrary, the condition of such a plentitude that language, the word, their meaning or suggestiveness, they have a sense of plentitude. They do not have a single meaning, they are not closed units of suggestiveness. And there lies the difference. And this difference creates the difference. He is using the word difference. This difference is therefore not more sensible than intelligible, and it permits the articulation of signs among themselves. And within the same abstract order, a phonic or graphic text of example or between two orders of expression. So he is telling what is difference? Difference is not more than intelligible idea, but it brings articulation of sign among themselves with same abstract order. That means a particular word may be used for different purposes with slight variation, and difference is the difference between our desire, what we want to express, and what ultimately we expressed. Welcome back. Now we will be discussing about difference. So, according to Derrida, difference is therefore the formation of form. And on the other side, the being imprinted of the imprint, difference is also something other than finitude. So, he is telling that difference is the formation of form. That means, as already I have told you, the difference brings out the distinction between desire and the enjoyment, or the difference between what the language is produced for and what language is defining or suggesting. So it is other than finitude. So difference is not also finite. It is also not fixed. As from the beginning I have told you, the deconstruction is a continuous process having no end, no finiteness. So difference is also not finitude. Difference doesn't resist appropriation, it doesn't impose an exterior limit on it. It begins by broaching alienation and it aids by leaving reappropriation breached. So it doesn't resist any appropriation. If the language and its suggestiveness is to be appropriated, difference is not going to resist it. We can appropriate the language in one meaning, and we can appropriate the language in a slightly different meaning. So difference is not going to restrict it, difference is not going to fix it, because it itself is not a finite concept. It can go on differing. Therefore it doesn't resist appropriation, and it means that difference makes the opposition of presence and absence possible. So difference is a presence of both absence and presence. It is a paradox. It is a paradoxical idea. It is a paradoxical concept that something is present and something is also absent. So, suppose, for example, I'll be telling you that you may say, Sir, I desire I can get first class in the examination, or I will get first class in the examination. So here what happens? That is your desire. You are desiring. And when you are desiring, it has a meaning. Sir, I am desiring to get a first class. Sir, I want a first class in the exam. Okay. So your parents, your friends, they will be telling, oh, then you have prepared. Your friends will be afraid of you. Oh, you have prepared in such a manner, you will be getting first class. But we have not prepared. But at the same time, you may be feeling apologetic to your friend. Oh, don't consider me like that. Because I am not asserting that I am not very much sure that I will be getting first class. I wish. I I desire first class means it is my wish. It may not be fulfilled. I simply wish. Or you may feel apprehensive that these people they have come to know that I am going to get first class. So they may think ill of me. So you'll be telling, no, 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 no. I am not told that I'll be getting first class. I simply desire. Means I am dreaming. I have not prepared anything. So what happens? There are so many different suggestiveness. So difference deals with that. So difference is not always a presence. That means it is not a fixity. Therefore, it is not always present. It also can suggest what is absent there in the language structure. It produces what it forbids, makes possible the very thing that it makes impossible. So it produces what? It forbids. That means you desire to get a first class and you don't want that you should be apologetic about it. You should declare that you are actually not getting first class, but you are expressing it. So difference produces what it forbids. What it produces just what it doesn't want. So it makes possible the very thing that it makes impossible. If difference is recognized as the obliterated origin of absence and presence, major forms of the disappearing and the appearing of the entity, it would still remain to be known if being before its determination into absence and presence. Therefore, difference is an active movement and it is comprehended the thought of being. So difference is an active movement. It moves actively. It doesn't have a fixity. It doesn't have a surety. It is a movement like a truancy. And it extends beyond the thought of being. What we have thought, the meaning or the difference can take it far beyond it. When I said that I desire I will get a first class, it is an innocent statement. Like everyone, I want. But somebody can take it far away. You'll say, oh, that means already you have prepared. That means secretly you are going through some other notes. You are consulting the teacher. You are doing this. You are doing that. Then you will be telling, oh, don't imagine so much. So, what is that? It is going beyond the thought of being. So, difference works in this manner. Therefore, the present is always the present of a pleasure, and pleasure is always a receiving of presence. What dislocates presence introduces difference and delay, spacing between desire and pleasure. So, he is telling difference is the spacing and delaying between desire and pleasure. What we desire and what we find as pleasurable or we are satisfied with. In between, there is a gap, there is a delay, and that is difference. So, in this way, Derrida is talking about his concept of deconstruction, that he is telling that language and writing produce its own dislocation, and deconstruction is an act at work. It is not a theory.